In 1854, a British archaeologist named William Lofts pulled a fractured clay tablet from the ruins of ancient Uruk in southern Iraq. It was catalogued, packaged, shipped to the British Museum, and for nearly 170 years, no one finished reading it. Not because it was too damaged, not because the language was too obscure, because the 3 linguists assigned to translate it in 2018, funded by a private institution whose name does not appear in the final report, requested anonymity before they delivered their findings. 2 of them never published again. The third left the academy quietly. 6 months after delivery. No explanation, no forwarding address in the academic record. The tablet doesn't describe a war. It doesn't describe a flood. It describes, in first-person clinical prose, what happens to a human consciousness in the first 90 seconds after physical death. And then, in the same clinical voice, without drama, without warning, it describes what happens to those who refuse the option offered to them. My name is Ivan, and tonight we are going to walk through every sequence of this tablet. By the end of this video, you will understand why this document has never been discussed in a mainstream academic context, and you will understand why the scribe who carved it into wet clay more than 4,000 years ago wrote, in the final line, that he was writing it specifically for you. The artifact is divided into 12 sequences. The first 3 describe what the scribe calls the geography of the limestone. His phrase for the terrain consciousness moves through immediately after death. The middle 4 describe a decision point, a moment, a question with only 2 valid answers. The last 5 describe what happens to those who choose the second answer, and those last 5 sequences are the ones that almost no modern source will openly discuss. Before we go into the sequences themselves, we need to understand one thing about the language on this tablet. The Sumerians had 2 words for the afterlife. The first was Kor, the underworld, the land of no return. The word that appeared in hymns, in public inscriptions, in the religious literature that the general population knew. A realm of shadows, a place where the dead ate dust and forgot their names. That word does not appear on this tablet. The word that appears, 7 times, always in the priestly form, never in the public form, translates roughly as the field that knows you, not a place, not a condition, a territory that reacts to whoever enters it, that responds to who you are and what you carry with you. That distinction is the key to everything that follows. The scribe writes in first person. This is not mythology. This is not instruction. This is testimony, a record of something witnessed or received and pressed into clay so it would survive. The first sequence begins at the moment of physical death. The scribe describes it as a detachment. The body, he writes, no longer responds. There is no pain. There is, initially, no fear. There is something he records as recognition, a word the translators spent considerable time with, because in the archaic Sumerian dialect on this tablet, it carries a very specific meaning, not recognition of a person or a place, recognition of something you had forgotten, something you knew, before you arrived here, that suddenly becomes clear again. From this vantage point, he writes, the body seems small, distant. The room seems unfamiliar in its most familiar details, the geometry slightly wrong, the proportions slightly off, as if you are seeing the same space from a position no living person has ever occupied. You are aware, he writes, of being observed. The observers are not yet visible. The second sequence describes the duration of this phase. Between 40 and 110 seconds, the scribe specifies, depending on what he calls the weight of the dying person. He does not define weight in physical terms. He defines it as the sum of unresolved obligations, unfinished relationships, words that were never spoken, the small, pending business of a life that keeps consciousness anchored for a few extra moments before, as he puts it, the field opens. This is the detail that the translators flagged most urgently in their report, because no Sumerian text in the standard corpus uses that word, weight, in that context. It appears in administrative records, in accounting, in the language of inventory and ledger. The dying person is being measured, not judged, measured. The third sequence ends when the measurement is complete. Something appears. The tablet calls it melamu, a word that standard Sumerian dictionaries translate as terrifying radiance or divine aura, the kind of overwhelming luminosity that appears when a god manifests. But the scribe's use of the word is completely different from every other appearance of it in the corpus. He describes it as warm. He describes it as familiar. He describes it as something that feels, and this is the translator's closest rendering, like the resolution to every question you have ever asked, arriving all at once. He describes it as a door. The light is not an experience, he writes. It is an entrance point. And then he does something no other Sumerian scribe does in any surviving text. He repeats the next line twice, in the same column, scored twice into the clay. The Sumerian equivalent of underlining. The light does not come to find you. It waits. It is positioned. And it waits for you to walk toward it with your own strength. You are not pulled. You are not carried. You enter. Inside the light, or behind it, depending on how you read the scribe's spatial language, there is a voice. The tablet records it as the one who speaks before you remember. The voice gives no instructions. It does not explain what is happening. It asks a single question. The question, in the most reliable modern translation, is this: are you going home now? That is the entire question. No qualifiers. No definition of what home means, or where it is, or who is waiting. Two valid answers exist, yes and no. Any other answer is counted as no. Silence, beyond a specific interval the scribe does not quantify, is counted as no. Hesitation, beyond that same interval, is counted as no. The system, he writes, does not require an active refusal. It only requires the absence of a yes. Here is the part of the tablet that the translators had to sit with for the longest time. Before the voice asks the question, in a fraction of a moment the scribe describes as seeing, consciousness is shown something, not in words, in what he calls compressed knowledge. You see what you agreed to, with whom you agreed, and what happens after you say yes. The scribe does not describe this seeing as comforting. He describes it as the reason why some people refuse. Stop for a moment and hold that. The reason people refuse the light is not fear of the unknown. It is that, in the moment before the question, they are shown exactly what they agreed to, and they do not want to honor it. The translators noted in their report that the Sumerian word used for this moment of seeing has no equivalent in the standard corpus. The closest relative they found was a word used in legal contracts, specifically in the section of a contract describing the terms that cannot be renegotiated after signing. You are not being offered a choice about the destination. You are being reminded of a contract you already signed. The only choice is whether you will honor it now. The scribe writes that a refusal is not a passive event. The moment consciousness declines, not says no, not speaks, but simply fails to say yes within the interval, three things happen in sequence. First, the light recedes, not fades. Recedes, as if pulled back toward whatever positioned it there. The door closes from the inside. Second, the heat ends. The scribe describes the surrounding environment as having no temperature in the moments after death, because consciousness, no longer embodied, no longer has a body to register heat or cold. But after the refusal, he writes, a coldness arrives, not in the air, in consciousness itself. He calls it the coldness of no longer being known, as if the field that had been holding its attention on you, sustaining you, orienting you, simply stops looking. Third, the observers become visible, the ones who had been watching from outside the visible range since the moment of death. The tablet calls them Gala, the same name that appears in the myth of Inanna's descent through the seven gates. Agents who escorted Inanna downward, who could not be bribed, could not be reasoned with, could not be made to feel. But the scribe is careful here. He does not call them demons. He calls them functionaries. The system, he writes, has a protocol for those who refuse. The Gala are the ones who carry it out. They do not speak. They do not threaten. They simply arrive, and they accompany consciousness to where it goes next. What comes next, the tablet calls key between, the between place, the threshold area, and the scribe's description of it is the most disturbing section of the entire document. It resembles the world the person just left, but wrong. Colors slightly off. Sounds that do not match the visual sources that produce them. People who appear and disappear without pattern or warning. The dead can see the living, sometimes hear them, cannot be seen or heard in return. You watch your family continue without you. You watch your children grow. You watch the people you loved make decisions you cannot influence, correct, or intervene in. You are present for all of it, invisible for all of it. And the interval, the scribe specifies, is not brief, between 30 and 70 Earth years. This is how long consciousness remains in the between place before the next stage begins. The translators noted that every major religious and cultural tradition on Earth has a name for this. The Egyptians called it the Duat's lowest chamber, the place where souls who failed the weighing wandered. Medieval Christian theology called it purgatory, and specified, in some texts, that those in it could see the living but not be seen. In Japanese Buddhist tradition, it is Gaki, the realm of hungry ghosts, who haunt the edges of the living world without the ability to touch it. In every tradition, the defining feature is the same: presence without contact, watching without being watched. The Sumerian tablet does not present this as theological teaching. It presents it as operational description. This is what happens. This is how long it lasts. Now, before we go into the final two sequences, because what comes next is where the tablet stops functioning as a description and starts functioning as something else entirely, I need to pause. What I'm about to walk you through gets significantly heavier, and some of it cannot be fully explained in video format alone. The complete translated sequences, the original Sumerian notation, the institutional documentation around the 2018 translation project, I have compiled all of it in a written document. The link is in the description. The QR code is on your screen. Take 5 seconds, grab it, then come back, because what comes next changes what this tablet actually is. After the interval in the between place, somewhere between 30 and 70 years, consciousness becomes what the scribe calls Leah. The word has been translated multiple ways: that which has lost the thread, that which no longer remembers the way back, that which cannot be called home. From the moment consciousness becomes Leah, the scribe writes, the original offer is permanently withdrawn. The light does not return. The voice does not ask again. The door at that point is not closed. It is no longer there. And the only exit the scribe describes, the only remaining path, is connection with a living body. He uses a specific Sumerian construction here that took the translators considerable time to render accurately. He describes this connection as both possible and forbidden by the system that designed it. Both things are true simultaneously. The possibility exists, the prohibition exists, and consciousness, having refused the original option and passed through the between place and become Leah, is in a state where the prohibition no longer functions as a deterrent. The scribe uses a word for this state that appears in agricultural texts. The word describes a field that has been left fallow for too long, a field that has stopped being useful for its original purpose and begun producing something else. He does not say what the something else is, but the final line of the 11th sequence is the one that the first translator, in 2018, photographed, put down, and did not return to for 11 days. He writes, "What every living culture calls haunting, what they call possession, what they call the one who will not leave." The tablet says these are not supernatural events. They are statistical inevitabilities. They are what happens when the interval expires, and the only remaining door is the one that was forbidden. The final sequence describes who built the system, and this is where the scribe abandons any remaining distance between himself and the material he is recording. He does not use the word gods. He uses a phrase that translates as, those who oversee the threshold. An administrative body, he specifies, older than the Anunnaki themselves. The Anunnaki, the gods of the standard Sumerian corpus, the ones who appear in the creation myths and the flood narratives and the king lists, reported to this body on matters that came from beyond. The scribe calls them those whose names are not for the tongue, and he describes the purpose of the system they built with complete flatness, no mythology, no moral framing. He calls it a recycling protocol. The light is the entry point for a process called the return. Consciousness is received at the point of entry, transferred to a central repository, and redistributed. He uses the same vocabulary, the translators noted, that Sumerian administrative scribes used for inventory management, worker rotation, material cycle. The words are identical. And then, in the last complete section before the closing line, the scribe writes something that no modern researcher who has encountered it has been willing to discuss in a public forum. He writes that the rejection rate has been increasing for centuries. That the between place is strained in ways the architects did not plan for. That Leah is accumulating faster than the system was designed to process. He does not say what this means for the system. He does not say what it means for the living. He only records it, with the same clinical tone he has used for every preceding sequence, as a fact. The last sentence of the tablet is the one that has never been included in any public summary of this document. The scribe writes, "I do not know what the correct answer is. I was not given the answer. I was given only the system and the instruction to record it, so that whoever reads this tablet will know the question is coming, and will have had time to think about it before the voice arrives. When you read this, I will have already faced it." He does not say what he answered. The tablet ends there. No seal, no scribal signature, no king's name, no date in the standard format, just the record, and the instruction to pass it forward. Look at the room you are in right now. Look at the people you would refuse the light for. Think about the words you have not said, the obligations that remain open, the weight the scribe was measuring. According to this tablet, you have already signed the contract. The terms are already written. The only remaining question is whether you will recognize the voice when it arrives, and whether, in that fraction of a second before the question is asked, when you are shown what you agreed to, you will know what it is you are being offered. The scribe who carved this into wet clay 40 centuries ago wrote it for the person reading it. He knew he would not be there to explain it, so he explained it anyway. The question is coming. You now know what it is. If this opens something for you, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and send this to someone who needs to hear it before they do. And my friend, we are competing for the iBest Award for Best Trivia Channel and Best 60+ Presenter. Your vote means everything. Vote every day in June. Follow iBest on Instagram, and your vote counts double. The link is pinned in the comments. Big hug. See you in the next one.